It's a pleasure to welcome Barrett Cooper. He's an actor, director, fight director, and instructor, and has been seen on the stages in New York City, in regional theater, and here in Louisville, as well as on TV, in commercials, voiceovers, and films. He was the founding, producing, artistic director of the Savage Rose Classical Theater Company, and currently he's on television in NBC's Chicago Fire and most recently in Fox's The Resident.
Glad you're feeling better, but your career is still in jeopardy.
As your lawyer, I have to reiterate that even if you managed to recover physically, you falsified a patient's file. That's a criminal offense. You could lose everything.
Because someone at Chastain told Mullins I lied to him to get him to the OR, putting him at risk for COVID.
Exactly.
And now that whistleblower is going to testify against you at trial.
And I was wondering if, as you perform in a modern TV show like The Resident, do you draw on that Shakespearean experience that you have? And if so, how?
It's a totally different style, if you want to say that. There's different tools you're going to use. Essentially, it's all the same thing. You're going for the truth of the character, for the truth of the moment. But as far as technique, it's a completely different ballgame. Voice-wise, you barely speak above a whisper because underneath your tie, you've got a microphone. And so literally I can speak about this loud, and you can find really kind of nice nuances like that. Whereas the projection on stage, even though at Kentucky Shakespeare, we do have, body mics. We have mics that, are right on our cheek. And so I can, at certain times when I was doing Falstaff, I barely got above a whisper and could still be heard by 2,000 people all the way back. So you have to learn how to modulate the voice in both of those. Whereas if you're doing, for instance, when I did Much Ado About Nothing at the Pioneer in Salt Lake, it was a 999 seat house, and there was no amplification. It was all with your naked voice. And so you have to learn how to, find nuance in the projecting, and also how to save your voice for 8 performances, a week. So you're not blowing your voice out.
What is the difference for you in terms of the performing in body, physically, when you're working in front of a camera for something like Chicago Fire versus being in the theater at Salt Lake?
That was actually quite interesting, because literally the director kept taking away. I would come up with some great physical stuff and he'd take it away, and he'd just go, stand there. And he goes, I want your voice to be as low as you can possibly get it. And so literally I was just standing, had no facial expression, nothing, which was completely different than everybody else on stage because I was the villain. And not only that, but once we got into tech rehearsal and I was in my costume, which was black velveteen bolero coat with gold buttons and a green, sash, and black pants with black boots. I had at the time much more black hair, a black beard, and a black eye patch. And I said, I don't have to do anything, do I? In film and television, you've got, this much camera space to work with. If you move out of that, you're out of frame or you're out of focus. So all of that with the cinematographer, the director of photography, all of that has to be mapped out. So everything becomes much more the parameters. Whereas sometimes on stage, you might be off 1.5 feet than you were the other night. You try not to be, but it happens. You have a little more leeway on stage to change up every night. And that's the beauty of live performance.
given your history now of performing Shakespeare for so many years, do you have a gut sense of how much Shakespeare wants his characters fixed on stage, or whether your sense now is that Shakespeare likes to give actors freedom to kind of roam or not?
What I've found in directing Shakespeare and in watching Shakespeare, the less movement, the more you focus on what's being said, because everything is in the text in Shakespeare. The text tells you when to move. The text tells you when to kneel, when to sit, when to stand, when to hit somebody, when, to have a sword fight, when to kiss. It's all in the text because there's, as there's very little stage direction. So all the stage direction is in the line. And an actor who has done a lot of Shakespeare will know when he needs to transition to help transition in movement as also transition in the telling of a story.
I was wondering if you had a feeling about which mode you preferred, Shakespeare when he's working in the comic mode or Shakespeare when he's working in the tragic mode.
Oh, I don't have a preference at all, just so long as I get to do Shakespeare. It's, I find if you do comedy very seriously, it becomes more funny. If I'm trying to be funny, I'm not going to be funny. But if the character is being serious, then that's when it becomes very funny. Because their stakes are so high. And of course, the audience knows they're being, duped or being a goofball or they're lying. And in the case in Falstaff, Falstaff is just a horrible liar. He lies on top of lies to get out of lies. And the audience knows it. Actually, most of the other characters know it. And he just keeps sticking his foot in it. And it's, but if you were doing it if I as an actor was trying to be funny, then more than likely it wouldn't be funny because it has to do with the truth of the situation. When I played Macbeth and directed it, I think one of the things that I personally like to find, and I think we found in our production, was the humor in very, very tense situations. I have seen a lot of productions of Macbeth and, Titus Andronicus that are so serious that it's kind of like, please just get me out of here because I can't take this. Hamlet is funny. It's funny throughout that play. It has very serious scenes, very serious moments. But if you really look at the text, there's irony. And that's what I think we found a lot in Macbeth. When he's talking to the two murderers about going and killing Banquo, he's saying some stuff that, on the surface, it's not funny, but in the playing of it, you find, well, that's kind of an odd thing to say. It's kind of like Quentin Tarantino. He can have a very, very tense, incredibly intense moment, and something will happen or something can be said that is absolutely hysterical, and it breaks the tension. Because what's going to happen is that if you can get the audience to laugh, the tragedy is that much more. If you lighten them up, then, once you get them doubled over in laughter, you can kick them in the teeth with the tragedy.
When I talk to my daughter, she's going to be 20 and pursuing stage management at Dartmouth.
Mm-hmm.
She is terrified that the people aren't going to come back and that live theater isn't going to resume after COVID. And I think she's not alone. I think there's an entire generation that grew up on High School Musical and Hamilton, and Broadway's been shuttered, and their classes are being conducted over Zoom, and all of these things have been taken away from them. A big part of their future dreams have been taken away from them. And they don't see it changing. They don't see it coming back. What would you say to this generation coming up facing this dilemma?
I think it will. I mean, it's stood the test of time already. It's been around for, 2,500 years. Going back to the Greeks, it's withstood religious shuddering. It's withstood television and film, in the 20th century. It's not going anywhere. It might be a little bit different. It might not. Well, it's not as popular as it was 100 years ago, but it will come back. I mean, I have to believe it will come back. I mean, people need it. They might not realize they need it, but they do, because they're going to have to get out of their house at some point. And once we get this pandemic under some sort of control, if we can, hopefully we will, you can already see it. People are going out to bars. People are going to Miami for, they have to go outside. They have to get out of their house. So it's not going anywhere. I mean, maybe that's just me hoping against hope, but I mean, once the sunspots have gotten rid of, the solar flares have gotten rid of all of the Wi-Fi and television feeds and satellites and everything, the only thing people are going to have again is sitting around a campfire telling stories. And that's what acting is.